Earlier this week, I had the opportunity to sit with Julie Hartman, an American talk show host and political commentator who rose to fame after publicly denouncing the progressive ideas she grew up with on PragerU, one of the largest conservative media organizations in the world. Ms. Hartman has since been serving as a guest host for Salem Media Group's nationally syndicated talk radio shows. She also hosts her own show, Timeless with Julie Hartman, 4 times a week and co-hosts a weekly show titled Dennis and Julie with the co-founder of PragerU, Dennis Prager himself. Julie has interviewed a wide array of influential individuals from American presidential candidates and senators to CIA agents and authors of best-selling books. She has co-hosted several shows with renowned cultural commentators such as Michael Knowles, Spencer Klavan, and several others. Julie and I had the opportunity to discuss everything from free speech, politics, the US economy, and the 2024 US elections. Julie, it's great to finally have you on the show. As I said before the interview, I've been following your content for the last 10, 15 months or so. And I've watched everything from your podcast to your show with Dennis Prager, as well as some of your PragerU videos. But my personal favorite still remains to be that first video you did back in May of 2021, I think it was, where you described your journey from liberalism to conservatism. And I think I liked it because of two reasons. One, coming out as a conservative in a liberal setting in and of itself is a tough thing to do. But deciding to go public about it on PragerU of all places, with Dennis Prager of all people, was the worst thing you could do as a liberal at that point. Not that he's a terrible person, but he just happens to have a lot of enemies on the other side of the political spectrum. So what influenced your decision? Why did you do it? And how did you deal with the consequence of it?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you so much for having me on the show and for your very kind words about my various videos. You really have been there since the beginning, as it sounds, and I have enjoyed watching you as well. I love reading about all that's going on in India, and so it's just a delight to be here, and thank you. You're right that going on to Dennis's radio show back in 2020 when I was a liberal was one of the riskiest things that I could have done. And the aftermath of that was quite painful because people from my college, and I went to Harvard, as you may know, which is, obviously in the news right now for not being particularly hospitable to free speech and conservatives. After I went on Dennis's radio show for the first time, I had a lot of people give me a lot of flack for doing so. I had many friends stand by me. They're my friends to this day. But I also had a lot of friends turn on me and say that I was racist and homophobic and terrible for going onto this platform. But it ended up being a great blessing because I figured out who my real friends are, and it forced me to become more comfortable in myself. There's nothing like seeing your face on the internet and having all these people comment about you to really force you to look inside yourself and be comfortable with what you say and stand by your words. But as far as your question of why did I do it, I had no idea that it would lead to this. I had no idea that it would lead to a talk show with Dennis and Julie. I had no idea it would lead to my own show. I'm thrilled that it did. But I did it at the time because I was so fed up with what I was seeing. I was quite frankly disgusted. It was the summer of 2020. There were these draconian and very irresponsible and irrational COVID lockdowns here in my home state of California and all across the United States. That was also the summer of the Black Lives Matter riots, where the police were defunded, cities were lit on fire, there were riots and looting. And people were encouraged to, have these Maoist self-criticism sessions for your white privilege. And I just looked around and I went, if this is the left, this is not who I am. And that's how I discovered Dennis Prager. That's how I emailed him. That's how I got on his radio show. And as trite as it may sound, I had to say what I was thinking and believing because I would have gone crazy if I had kept it inside. And I felt a moral responsibility to highlight the insanity in my own country and try in my own way to expose it.
Right. I mean, your story is kind of relatable to me. I have friends in the US who tell me the same thing, who think the same way, but who don't act the same way. I call them secretly conservative, openly liberal at the same time, right? So if you look at their social media, they'd have all kinds of posts and memes and photographs which say, Trump is the Hitler of the 21st century. Bring back Obama. Biden may be old, but his policies are gold. All kinds of stuff like that. And then when they come to India, the funny thing is we ask them. The first question that we ask them is, "What do you genuinely think of Donald Trump?" And the answer is invariably, he's actually not that bad. He's not as bad as the media portrays him. And then we dig deep and they say, well, he was actually doing a good job. The economy was doing better. Gas prices were low. The black community, they call him a racist, but the black community benefited the most in that period, especially in terms of poverty. It was at a record low, unemployment at a record low. And they talk about it. And I truly believe that they would secretly vote for Trump as well if given a chance. So I think there are people like that, which brings me to the question: isn't that okay as well? I mean, should everyone suffer this, the consequences you did by coming out and being brave, or is it okay just to be secretly conservative and openly liberal?
Hmm. Well, I often say that I am one of the most privileged people in the world. Not only that I live in the United States of America, not only that I've had amazing opportunities, but because I can speak about my values and what I truly believe in, and that is conservatism, and I get paid for it. A lot of people are not lucky enough to be in my position. A lot of people in this country, if they do say what they really believe in their place of employment, at the very least, they will be shunned. They'll be a social pariah. And it is actually likely in some cases that they will be fired. So I have a lot of understanding for the difficult situation that people are in right now in this country, where it is so unpopular and indeed smeared to be conservative. However, what I will say is, at the risk of sounding, too moralistic and, preachy, I don't intend to sound too heavy-handed by saying this, but it is true. We're in a really bad place in our country. We're in a bad place with DEI and the amount that it has infected our school systems. I read these Department of Education codes all across the country where they're teaching kids as young as 4 years old that they may not be their gender. They're saying that regular virtues like objectivity or white supremacy, our test scores are falling hugely. Over half of American students cannot read at grade levels. That is a huge problem. We have a terrible immigration problem where over 7 million illegal immigrants have come into the United States. It's at an enormous fiscal cost to us, but also the Democratic Party is trying to count those individuals in the census so as to gain more votes, so more electoral power. We certainly have international crises. Under President Biden's term in office, we had a disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal where billions of dollars in American money and equipment went to the Taliban. We had Putin invade Ukraine. We obviously had the October 7th massacre in Israel, and we have an ever encroaching China all around the world, and especially nearing more towards Taiwan. We're also $35 trillion in debt, which is, needless to say, a big problem. We have a terrible crime problem as the result of despicable policies like repealing cash bail in several cities. So although I do have a great sense of understanding for the precarious situation that many Americans are in, they have a moral responsibility to stand up right now, because all of us are the beneficiaries of this system. And we owe it to this system that has given us all of the opportunities and blessings that it has to stand up and protect that system when it is so under assault as it is now.
Yeah, it's absolutely important to speak up, especially in these times. Speaking of free speech, I have a question. In fact, it's a clarification that I like to make about liberalism or progressivism. Look, when you look at the very definition of liberalism, it goes like this: it's an ideology or a philosophy that supports and promotes values such as democracy, civil liberty, free speech, free enterprise. But the minute you ask someone in the United States or even here in India, if you say, "Oh, I'm glad Elon Musk bought Twitter because I'm all for free speech," the immediate response would be invariably, "Are you a far-right conservative? Why are you a right-wing extremist?" And it's kind of surprising to me, because isn't free speech the most liberal thing to do?
Yes, but here's the problem. You're absolutely right that free speech is and was considered to be a liberal value. But right now, the Democratic Party in the United States is not liberal, it is leftist. And my colleague and co-host Dennis Prager always makes this distinction. A liberal believes in free speech, a leftist does not. A liberal believes that you should not give puberty blockers and gender altering surgeries to minors before they're capable of making, an informed decision themselves. A leftist does think that you should give, puberty blockers and surgeries to minors. So I think that distinction is, for me, very, very helpful in kind of explaining what's going on, that a lot of people now are not liberals, they're leftists. And to your point about something like free speech now being considered a conservative value, a lot of what modern day American conservatives advocate for, in my view, isn't really that conservative. Like for instance, I'm very proud to say that I'm conservative because I want to conserve the principles of the American founding. I think those principles are brilliant and they facilitate the greatest amount of opportunity, equality, and human flourishing, and I want to conserve those. But frankly, I sort of examine my views and I go, are they really that conservative? Are they really that right wing? I'm pro police. I'm pro, having a border. What a crazy idea, right? Having a strong border in our country. I'm pro free speech. I am patriotic. I love my country. I'm pro freedom of religion. The list goes on. And those are just what I would call common sense values. But the problem is that 30 to 40 years ago, those common sense values used to be things that both the left and the right agreed upon. I always kind of picture it as like a Venn diagram. There was that center core of the Venn diagram of all of those things that I just mentioned that both sides agreed on. And then they fought about truly liberal or conservative things, spending, abortion, unionization, etc. But now what's happened is that the left has gotten so far off the reservation that now conservatives, the right, are just trying to defend those core set of values that everyone agreed on 30 years ago. So I think your observation is exactly right.
But you have to acknowledge the fact that the left is actually winning the culture war. And the reason I say that is because when I was growing up in the late 90s or the early 2000s, me and my sister would come back home from school. We'd sit across the table with our parents, have a cup of coffee, and then we tell them what happened at school. They tell us what happened at work. There was this mutual exchange and a feedback that followed, usually either in the form of a compliment or criticism. And that used to be the feedback mechanism. So every time I wanted to know what was right and wrong, the first person I would go to was my father or my mom. But now that has changed. It isn't the same anymore. Families barely have such conversations, unfortunately. And most kids spend time either on social media or on Netflix or listening to their favorite song or watching their favorite movie. And pretty much the rest of the day is spent at school. So if you think about it that way, all of these institutions that shape culture or influence culture are largely leaning left. Everything from news media, social media, academia, the music industry, Hollywood. So when you have all of these cultural factors that influence a society leaning left, how do you think conservatives can revive? I mean, is there a chance at all?
Well, first, let me acknowledge that what you're saying is absolutely right. I mean, the left has been staggeringly successful in infiltrating all of those aforementioned institutions. I do think, though, I guess my sanity rests on a kind of optimism that things can get better. But I do think that people are slowly waking up because unfortunately, people need to feel the consequences of their choices very personally and very starkly in order for them to make a change. And I think we're seeing that right now with crime, where there are a lot of people who supported these crazy defund the police, abolish cash bail policies. And now they are seeing, in their own neighborhoods, how terrible crime has gotten. And they're kind of going, yeah, I really do actually want police. I actually do want protection. So I think there's some hope in that category. But another thing that gives me a little bit of hope, despite the massive success and infiltration of the left all over our country, is that the left, I think, wokeism, I think it will fall apart. It's just a question of when and how bad is it going to be when it falls apart. And the reason I believe that is because wokeism is not based on principles. Wokeism, by definition, is based on subjectivity. You know, this is what they talk about with DEI, with oppressor versus oppressed worldview and intersectionality worldview. They don't judge people based on objective criteria. They judge people based on immutable characteristics and where they fit into the oppressed versus oppressor mindset. And what we're starting to see, I think this has been here for a while, but I think more people are waking up to it, is that those internal contradictions are starting to show themselves and kind of turn on themselves. So let me just give you a few examples. The first is woke people say that they protect, amplify, defend the voices of women. They position themselves as very pro-women, but then they say there's no such thing as a woman. You know, it's crazy. They say, oh, well, you know, America is a systemically racist, terrible country, but then they are the biggest advocates of non-white immigrants coming to this country. They say if you are non-white and non-Christian, you have to view yourselves in terms of your group identity. But if you are white and you are Christian, you're forbidden from viewing yourself in terms of your group identity. Mm-hmm. It's not possible to sustain a movement or a society based on those contradictions. So I do think it will fall apart, but as I said, it's just a question of when and how bad will it be when it does.
Yeah, I know my questions have been largely pessimistic, so bear with me. I've got one more question,
That's okay.
which is one more question that's pessimistic. Look, from a purely Indian perspective, we're nowhere close to the United States at the moment, but we are the fastest growing economy in the world. Number 5 as of now, and expected to be up there in the next 15, 20 years. Same with China, they're going to be up there in the next 15 years. So from a purely Indian perspective, when we watch what's happening in the United States, I wouldn't say me, but I know a lot of people who say they're happy to see the undisputed champion United States falling apart. They are happy to see that. And same with the Chinese. They are happy to see the riots that happened in 2020. They were happy to see what happened to your home state, California. We've been seeing what's happening there. We've been seeing what's happening with Trump. We've been seeing what's happening with Biden, obviously. The strongest country demands a strong president, but unfortunately, that's not the case either. And the economy. So as you mentioned, 35 trillion in debt. So all of those things are really, really concerning, isn't it, from an American point of view? And it's kind of like a relief to a lot of Indians and Chinese people who look at it from a very competitive perspective. So what's your take on that?
I know, I agree with you. Well, it's very concerning, though not surprising, to hear that many people are happy with and rooting for our demise. And I can speak specifically about China, who really is one of our, if not our greatest adversary, as far as the campaigns that they have pursued, and with great success, to subvert and undermine the United States. Obviously through fentanyl, obviously through spying. They buy farmland next to our spy bases. They have a spy base on Cuba. They sent a spy balloon over the United States. They have bought off our leaders, including President Biden, by bribing them. They also have confused and deadened the minds of hundreds of millions of Americans through apps like TikTok, spreading misinformation and just, terrible values. And so it's sad to say, but, they are getting exactly what they want, and we are letting them. What's concerning is in this country, we used to care, back during the time of the Cold War, for instance, we used to care if our adversary was beating us or if they were undermining us. But now in America, there's a kind of jadedness where people are somewhat aware that it's happening, but they don't seem to care. And that is what is more concerning to me than, in fact, the infiltration by China itself. But how do I see America reviving itself? Well, first, we have to elect Donald Trump in 2024 in November, and I will do everything I can as it stands now to make that happen, barring an unforeseen circumstance, of course. It is March. A lot can happen, but as it stands right now, I will do everything I can to try to make that happen. But, as important as this election in 2024 is, as much as I hate to say it, it may not be as consequential as people on both the right and the left make it out to be, because one president in 4 years cannot unravel all of the massive amounts of damage that we have discussed that have happened in the United States. That is a much longer term project that all Americans, regardless of political affiliation, need to get behind. So we just have to get back to what used to make us great. We have to be fiscally responsible. We have to be vigorously pro free speech, pro freedom of religion, pro democracy, pro America. We have to have a sustained sense of national identity. We need to judge people based on their merit and not on their immutable characteristics. We need to hold people to high standards, whether that's in school, whether that's in their conduct in everyday life. We cannot let people get away with crime, for instance. That's why I'm a conservative. It has worked. And if we're going to revive America, we have to go back to our core principles.
Speaking of revival, as well as a succession plan, as you rightly said, 4 years isn't enough for a president. And I don't think Donald Trump would go further than 4 years. He can't, right? I mean, it's only 8 years. So
yeah, yes, he can't serve more than 2 terms.
Right, right. I watched your interview with Tulsi Gabbard, the whole interview. It was amazing. I loved your questions. But I have a clarification to make, because the last time we spoke, you said that you really liked Vivek Ramaswamy, how articulate he was, how bold he is with his policies, and how he handles the media. And your favorite governor, Ron DeSantis, you also mentioned him. He's probably America's favorite governor if you're a Republican. So you mentioned him, and you said that he's also a very capable candidate. But when I watched the interview, it seemed as though you think that Tulsi would make a better VP candidate than Ron and Vivek. But Vivek, as I said, is very, very articulate. Many people consider him Trump 2.0 as far as policies are concerned. Ron, way more seasoned than Vivek, has been Republican for a very long time, compared to someone like Tulsi, who's only recently Republican. She was in the Democratic Party till 2022. And many people consider her a moderate, not even conservative. So do you think that would affect the acceptance of Tulsi? And do you think it is a wrong move to make?
I don't think that she's better than the other ones that you mentioned. I think that she is just as good and just as viable of a candidate as the others that you mentioned. I would be thrilled if Donald Trump picked Tulsi Gabbard. I would be thrilled if he picked Vivek Ramaswamy. I'm a huge fan of Vivek Ramaswamy. I'd be thrilled if he picked Ron DeSantis. One of the things that does give me a lot of optimism is that we do, in the what I call common sense movement, I'm not even going to call it conservative or Republican, just common sense movement, we do have a lot of up and coming stars, and indeed stars in their own right, who will outlast Trump, because obviously Trump is way older than they are. And so that gives me a lot of optimism. But what I really like about Tulsi Gabbard, although you're right, she has not said that she's conservative, I really appreciate her independence. And I think that may be appealing to people on both the right and left, because she isn't dogmatic. I mean, she's very principled, at least from what I have seen of her. But she isn't, you don't get a sense that she's so buried into one worldview that she's unwilling to change. I mean, she left the Democratic Party. I give her a lot of credit for doing that. I wish she did it earlier. But it's a really rare quality that she has, and that is the courage to change course if you determine that what you are doing is wrong. So I think she'd be a great leader in that respect. I am hugely supportive of Vivek Ramaswamy. I think he is unbelievably articulate. He doesn't take the bait or get ruffled. He'll go into hostile environments and espouse our values in a devastatingly effective and accurate way. As you mentioned, Ron DeSantis, I think, is one of the best governors to ever exist in the United States. He has extraordinary administrative ability. So any of those people I would be thrilled with.
I have a special interest when it comes to Vivek, by the way, because his parents happen to be from the same home state as I am in India. So probably that's why. But just as much as I admire Vivek, I'm also concerned about his political future, because I feel that he is too good not to be targeted. Because if you listen to some of the things he says, like he wants to shut down the FBI, revolutionize the education system, drain the swamp, make the media accountable for what it says, raise the voting age to 25. Those are the kind of things. Some of those things are the kind of things that Trump used to say. So, and we all know what's happening to Trump now. So do you really think Vivek has it within him to make it far in politics? And do you think he will be targeted if he ever becomes president or attempts to become president?
There's no doubt that he will be targeted. Any person with any moral backbone, and especially a person with conservative values, will be targeted. But yes, I do have faith that he will have a long-term career in this space.
Right. Okay. Right. Final question. It's about America's least favorite president, at least in terms of numbers and at least in terms of what the polls say, Joe Biden. Right. So Biden, we used to watch speeches of Obama, regardless of where we stood at the political spectrum here in India. But with Biden, what we watch are the memes and the gaffes, and we enjoy it, to be honest.
They're
But
funny.
they're funny. You have to admit it. But as you know, as much as you admire what's funny about it, it makes us worried as well. Like, I know the narrative looks great when you say it's Trump versus Biden 2.0, but is there a chance that he might run, or would it be Michelle Obama or Gavin Newsom or someone else?
I mean, as of right now, he's running. And he's very stubborn. He doesn't want to give up the presidency. And his vice president is very stubborn and doesn't want to give up the vice presidency. But I would not rule out a change. That doesn't mean I'm thinking it will totally happen, but I wouldn't rule it out because the Democratic Party, to your point, has a huge problem on its hands because 85% of Americans, according to a recent poll, think that President Biden is just too old to hold public office. And Kamala Harris has a worse approval rating than Dick Cheney, who was another very uh, unpopular vice president. She has a worse approval rating right now than Dick Cheney had even at his lowest. So the Democratic Party does have an issue. And so I wouldn't be surprised if maybe during the Democratic convention, sometime between now and November, they would swap out one of them for perhaps Michelle Obama or Gavin Newsom. Michelle Obama has claimed that she doesn't want it. Gavin Newsom, to be really blunt, is a white man. And a lot of the Democratic Party's pitch to America, and especially Black America, is that they have a Black woman as vice president. But nothing in politics is out of the realm of possibility.